I'm Clara, I'm 32 years old, and my life changed with a single text message from my parents that said, "You're no longer welcome here. The house belongs to your sister now." The last 5 years, I've been the silent, load-bearing wall of my family's financial house. A house I just learned that I am no longer welcome in. It all happened so fast, yet the foundation for this collapse was laid years ago, brick by brick, with every act of favoritism, every overlooked contribution, and every sacrifice that was treated not as a gift, but as my simple duty. I work as an IT project manager, a job that demands organization, foresight, and a clear understanding of cause and effect. My life is a series of timelines, budgets, and deliverables. It's a career I chose because it's stable, logical, and rewarding. That stability was something my family desperately needed when my father, David, was forced into early retirement due to health issues about 6 years ago. My mother, Susan, had been a homemaker for most of her life, and their savings were modest at best. They were facing the terrifying prospect of losing their home, the very house I grew up in. At the time, I was 27, just starting to find my footing in my career. My younger sister, Chloe, was 21, flitting between part-time jobs and her dreams of becoming a social media influencer. There was no question of who would step up. Chloe was the artist, the dreamer. I was the planner, the pragmatist. "Clara, honey," my father had said, his voice heavy with a shame that I now realize was more for his situation than for the request he was about to make. "We don't know what to do. The bank isn't going to wait." So we made an arrangement. It was a verbal agreement, sealed over the kitchen table with my mother's watery eyes and my father's trembling hand on my shoulder. I would take over the mortgage payments. To make it fair, they said, my name would be added to the deed eventually. It was an investment, they framed it. I would be helping them now and securing my own future later. The house would be mine one day. It was a promise that made the sacrifice feel logical, like another project plan. I set up the automatic transfers from my bank account, a quiet, monthly hum of responsibility. A year later, the property taxes became another burden they couldn't handle. "Just for a little while until we get back on our feet," my mother had whispered over the phone. I added that to my financial load, setting up another automatic payment. Then came the car. Their old sedan finally gave out, and they needed something reliable for appointments. Chloe, of course, needed it for her content creation trips. I co-signed the loan for a new, sensible SUV, and before long, found it was just easier if I made the monthly payments myself. They always said they'd pay me back. They never did. The disparity between how my family treated Chloe and how they treated me was a constant, dull ache in my life. I saw it not as malice, but as a fundamental difference in their perception of us. I was the reliable daughter, the one who was so good with money. Chloe was the fragile, creative one who needed to be protected and nurtured. Their love for me felt like an expectation, their love for her felt like an adoration. I remember my college graduation. I was the first in our family to get a degree. I'd worked 2 jobs to minimize my student loans, and I was immensely proud. My parents attended, but they left early. Chloe had a dance recital that same evening, not a professional one, just a showcase at a local studio, and they didn't want to miss her big moment. I received a congratulatory card with $20 in it. A week later, for Chloe's 20th birthday, they threw her a lavish party in the backyard, renting a tent and hiring a caterer, a cost I'm certain they put on a credit card they were struggling to pay down. When I asked my mom about it, she just smiled and said, "Oh, you know Chloe. She just deserves to feel special." The implication, of course, was that I didn't need such things. My achievements were their own reward. Another time, about 2 years into my financial support of them, I needed to have emergency dental surgery. The cost was significant, nearly $3,000 after insurance. I asked my parents if they could possibly cover their own utilities for just 2 months so I could manage the bill. The request was met with a week of tense silence, followed by my father sitting me down and explaining, with a pained expression, that things were just too tight. He made me feel guilty for asking, as if I were threatening their stability. I ended up putting the surgery on my own credit card and spent the next year paying it off. 3 months later, Chloe decided she wanted to take a 3-month sabbatical to find her artistic voice in another city. My parents thought it was a wonderful idea. They proudly told me they had given her $2,000 from their emergency fund to help her with rent. When I stared at them in disbelief, my mother patted my arm and said, "Clara, you're so practical. You don't understand the needs of a creative soul. She needs this." I wasn't just the family bank. I was the family bedrock. Solid, dependable, and completely taken for granted. I paid the bills, fixed the leaky faucets when I visited on weekends, and set up their new Wi-Fi router. Chloe posted stylized photos of the home-cooked meals my mom made for her, with captions about being blessed, never once mentioning that the very roof over her head was paid for by the sister she barely spoke to. I lived in a modest apartment across town, a place I chose specifically because the rent was low enough that I could comfortably afford it while also supporting my parents. My own dreams of buying a condo, of traveling, of financial freedom, were all packed away and labeled for later. My project plan had one primary objective: keep the family afloat. I never realized that I was just the captain of a ship they intended to give to someone else. The signs were all there, like small cracks in a dam. I just never believed they would let it break. The tipping point, the event that finally sent a wrecking ball into the fragile structure of our family dynamic, started with a photograph. It was a picture Chloe posted on her Instagram account. She was standing on a balcony, a brilliant blue ocean stretching out behind her. In her hand was a colorful drink with a little umbrella in it. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to listen to your soul and book the flight." So grateful for this spontaneous trip to the Caribbean to recharge my creative batteries. Wanderlust, living my best life spontaneous. I stared at the photo on my phone, a knot tightening in my stomach. The Caribbean, spontaneous. I knew for a fact that Chloe's part-time job at the coffee shop barely covered her gas and phone bill. There was no way she could afford a trip like that. Hundreds of comments poured in from her followers, praising her for being so brave and inspirational. "You go, girl," one wrote. "Manifesting this energy," said another. I knew where the money had come from. It had to have come from our parents. The same parents who couldn't afford their own utilities for 2 months so I could have necessary dental surgery. The anger I felt was sharp and cold. For years, I had been diligently managing my budget, foregoing my own desires, all to maintain a household that was now funding my sister's luxurious vacations. I didn't act on it immediately. I let the anger simmer, trying to be rational. I was the project manager after all. I needed all the data before I held a meeting. I waited until the weekend, when I made my customary Sunday visit. I usually spent a few hours there, checking on things, having dinner, and performing the role of the dutiful daughter. When I arrived, Chloe was holding court in the living room, regaling our parents with stories of her trip. She had a new tan and a pile of souvenirs on the coffee table. "And the water was just like unbelievably clear, Mom," she was saying, her hands gesturing wildly. "I met this amazing artist who sells jewelry on the beach. It was so inspiring." My mother was hanging on her every word, her eyes shining. "Oh, that sounds wonderful, sweetie. You needed a break." My father nodded in agreement. "That's right. All work and no play is no good." I stood in the doorway, my purse clutched tightly in my hand. The irony of his statement was so thick I could have choked on it. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room, forcing a neutral expression onto my face. "Hi everyone," I said. Their attention shifted to me. The energy in the room subtly changed. My mother's smile became a little more polite, my father's posture a little more formal. With me, it was always business. "Clara, you're here," my mother said. "Chloe was just telling us all about her trip." "I saw," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "It looked expensive." The air grew still. Chloe's smile faltered, replaced by a defensive glare. "It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience," she said, her tone sharp. "Something you probably wouldn't understand." "What I don't understand," I said, keeping my gaze level, "is how you paid for it, or more accurately, how they paid for it. I nodded toward our parents. My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his armchair. Now, Clara, that's not really your concern. It is my concern, I replied, the years of suppressed frustration finally bubbling to the surface. It becomes my concern when I'm paying the mortgage on this house. It becomes my concern when I'm paying the property taxes. It becomes my concern when I get told there's no money to help me with a medical emergency, but there's apparently a secret Caribbean vacation fund I wasn't aware of. My mother gasped, placing a hand over her heart as if I had physically struck. Her, that is a horrible thing to say. We used a little bit of our savings. We wanted to do something nice for your sister. Your savings? I shot back, my voice rising despite my best efforts to control it. The savings that weren't there when the roof needed repairs last year, the savings that weren't there when the water heater broke, I paid for those things. I paid for them from my savings. The money I set aside for a down payment on my own place someday. Chloe stood up, her face flushed with anger. Why are you attacking me? You're just jealous. You're jealous that I'm actually living my life instead of sitting in a boring office all day, staring at spreadsheets. Staring at spreadsheets, I said with a bitter laugh, is what keeps this roof over your head. It's what puts gas in the car you drive. You think this life you're living is free? It's not. It's just being paid for by someone else. By me. That's enough, Clara, my father boomed, his face turning red. You have no right to come into this house, our house, and speak to your sister that way. My right? I was incredulous. I pay for this house, I have every right. You're being cruel and controlling, Chloe said, her eyes welling up with tears. It was her signature move. When logic failed, the waterworks began. You always hold that money over our heads. You make us feel like we're charity cases. You are a charity case. The words were out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Chloe let out a sob and ran from the room. My mother shot me a look of pure venom before rushing after her. I was left alone in the living room with my father. He just stared at me, his face a mask of disappointment. You've always been like this, he said, his voice low and cold. Cold and calculating. Like your job, you see everything in terms of money and transactions. You don't understand family. I don't understand family, I asked, my voice breaking. I have sacrificed my entire adult life for this family. I've put all my dreams on hold. What has she ever sacrificed? What have you sacrificed? You sacrificed my financial future so she could get a tan. He didn't have an answer for that. He just shook his head slowly and walked out of the room, heading upstairs to console his favored daughter. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The house I paid for, the house where I was now the villain. I could hear my mother's muffled, soothing tones and Chloe's theatrical crying from upstairs. They were reinforcing their narrative, Chloe the victim, Clara the monster. I turned and walked out the front door without another word. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly behind me, a quiet click that felt like a final punctuation mark. As I drove back to my small, rented apartment, a strange feeling washed over me. Beneath the deep, searing pain of the argument, there was something else. It was the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of a wire being stretched to its breaking point. Something had to give. I just had no idea it would be my entire family. The 2 days following the argument were filled with a tense, suffocating silence. It was a silence I knew well. It was the punishment my family used when I had transgressed, when I had failed to live up to their unspoken expectations. Usually, after a few days of the cold shoulder, I would be the one to break. I would call, apologize for whatever perceived slight I had committed, and restore the fragile peace. My role was not just to be the provider, but also the eternal peacekeeper, the one who always smoothed things over. But this time was different. The words that had been said, the ugly truths that had been dragged into the light, couldn't be unsaid. The image of Chloe's vacation photo was burned into my mind, a symbol of the deep injustice that I had chosen to ignore for far too long. So I didn't call. I went to work, immersed myself in my projects, and tried to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. I kept checking my phone, not out of a desire to reconcile, but out of a morbid curiosity. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from a long day at the office, microwaved a sad-looking frozen dinner, and was scrolling through my emails when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from a group chat my mother had created years ago titled Family. It contained only 4 members: my mom, my dad, Chloe, and me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I opened the message. It wasn't from my mother. It was from my father's number, but the language had the blunt, dramatic flair of both of them, likely composed together as a united front. The text was short, brutal, and devoid of any emotion. Clara, after your disgraceful behavior on Sunday and the cruel things you said to your sister, we have made a decision. You are no longer welcome here. The house belongs to Chloe No. We need to protect her from your negativity and controlling nature. Do not contact us. I read the message once, then twice, then a third time. The words swam before my eyes, surreal and nonsensical. You are no longer welcome here. The words echoed in the silent apartment. Here, the house I was paying for. The house whose mortgage payment was scheduled to be automatically deducted from my account in 9 days. The house belongs to Chloe now. Belongs? How had they secretly changed the deed? Was the verbal agreement we made 5 years ago just a puff of smoke, a convenient lie to secure my compliance? Of course it was. The realization crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had been a fool. A convenient, useful, profitable fool. For a moment, all I felt was a deep, cavernous wave of pain. It was the raw, primal hurt of being rejected by your own family, of having your love and sacrifice thrown back in your face as if it were worthless. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. I had given them everything. My time, my money, my future. And in return, they had cast me aside for the daughter who gave them nothing but demands. But then, as the initial shock subsided, a new feeling began to emerge from beneath the pain. It was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was clarity. The text message, as cruel as it was also a gift. It was the final, undeniable piece of data I needed to complete my project assessment. For years, I had been operating under a set of false assumptions. I had believed in their promises. I had believed that my contributions were valued. I had believed that, deep down, they loved me equally. The text message wiped all of those assumptions away. It was a clean slate. You are no longer welcome here. They didn't want me. The house belongs to Chloe now. They didn't value my investment. Do not contact us. They didn't want a relationship. They had drawn a line in the sand. They had ended the arrangement. They had terminated the contract. My project manager brain, the cold, calculating part of me my father so despised, kicked into gear. A project whose core stakeholders have abandoned it cannot continue. It's time to initiate the shutdown protocol. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed out a reply. I deleted 3 different drafts. The first was angry, full of accusations. The second was pleading, asking them how they could do this. The third was just a single, sad question mark. None of them felt right. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to rage or beg. They wanted drama, which would only feed their narrative that I was the unstable one. I wouldn't give it to them. I typed a new message, my fingers suddenly steady. Thanks for the clarity. I hit send. There was no rage, no sadness, just a simple acknowledgement of the information they had provided. It was the most honest thing I had said to them in years. They had, in their own brutal way, set me free. The weight on my shoulders, the constant pressure to provide and please, began to feel lighter. The pain was still there, a raw wound in my heart. But the clarity was a clean, sharp antiseptic. For the first time, I saw the family project for what it was, a one-sided transaction where I provided all the capital and received none of the equity. And now, the other parties had officially pulled out. So it was time for me to pull out too. I didn't sleep that night. The mixture of profound hurt and strange liberation was a potent cocktail that kept my mind racing. I spent the hours before dawn not crying but planning. My apartment, usually a place of quiet respite, transformed into a command center. I pulled out my laptop, a legal pad, and a pen. It was time to deconstruct the financial scaffolding I had so carefully built around my family for the past 5 years. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. It was about accepting the reality they had handed to me and acting accordingly. My first task began at 8:01 a.m. on Wednesday morning. I logged into my online banking portal. My screen glowed in the dim light of my living room. I navigated to the automatic payments and transfers section. There they were, a neat list of my obligations. Mortgage payment, National First Bank, $1,850 month. Scheduled for the 1st. Property tax escrow, County Tax Office, $450 month. Scheduled for the 15th. Car loan, Capital Auto Finance, $380 month. Scheduled for the 5th. Utilities, gas and electric, City Power, $200 month. Scheduled for the 22nd. With 4 precise clicks, I canceled every single one. A pop-up window asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" For each one, I clicked confirm without hesitation. It was a strange, almost out-of-body experience. I felt like I was simply executing a series of commands, a logical sequence of events set in motion by their text message. The emotional weight of it would come later, I was sure, but now, there was only the clean, cold logic of action. The next step required phone calls. This was the part I dreaded, but it was necessary. I needed to officially sever the ties. I started with the bank that held the mortgage. After navigating the automated menu, I was connected to a customer service representative named Brenda. National First Bank, this is Brenda speaking. How can I help you? Hello, Brenda, I said, my voice steady. My name is Clara Miller. I'm calling about mortgage account number 743. I read the number off my statement. I am not the primary name on this mortgage, but I have been the sole payer for the past 5 years through an authorized third-party payment plan. Okay, I see the account here for David and Susan Miller, and I do see your name listed as an authorized party. How can I help you, Ms. Miller? I am calling to inform you that as of today, I will no longer be making any payments on this loan. The authorization from my bank account has been canceled. You will need to direct all future correspondence and billing statements directly to the primary borrowers, David and Susan Miller, at the address on file. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint clicking of Brenda's keyboard. I understand, ma'am. So just to confirm, you are ceasing all payments. The next payment is due on the 1st of the month. That is correct. I am ceasing all payments, effective immediately. The responsibility for the loan now rests entirely with the borrowers. All right, ma'am. I have made a note on the account. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, Brenda, that's all, thank you. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. One down. Next was the county tax office. That call was quicker, more bureaucratic. I simply informed them that the escrow payments from my account were stopping and that the property tax bill should be sent directly to the homeowners. The clerk on the phone sounded bored and simply said, "Noted." The most difficult call was to Capital Auto Finance. The car was a tangible object. I could picture my mother driving it to the grocery store, Chloe using it to go to the mall. Canceling this payment felt more direct. Capital Auto Finance, you're speaking with Gary. I repeated my script, giving him the account number and explaining that I, the co-signer and payer, would no longer be funding the loan. Gary's tone was different from the others. It was more cautious. Okay, Ms. Miller, I see you are the co-signer on this loan. You understand that as a co-signer, you are equally responsible for the debt. If the primary borrower, Mr. David Miller, fails to make the payment, it will negatively affect your credit score. I'm aware of that, Gary, I said. This was the one part of the plan that carried a personal risk, but it was a risk I was willing to take. My credit was excellent, and I knew it could weather a small storm. More importantly, I knew my parents had no way to make the payment. I am simply informing you that the payment will not be coming from my account. What happens after that is between you and the primary borrower. But ma'am, he pressed, the payment is due in less than a week. If it's not made, the account will go into delinquency and repossession procedures could begin. I understand, I said calmly. Please direct all future communications to David Miller. I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly. Repossession. The word felt heavy, violent. But what choice did they leave me? They wanted the house and the lifestyle, but they had disowned the engine that made it all run. My last act was to log into the City Power website and remove my credit card from the automatic billing for the utilities. It was the smallest payment, but it was part of the same system. The system where Clara paid for everything. As I closed my laptop, the sun was beginning to stream through my apartment window. The world was waking up to a new day. For the first time in 5 years, my income was entirely my own. The feeling was dizzying. I looked around my small apartment. It suddenly didn't feel like a place of sacrifice anymore. It felt like a starting point. The pain of their betrayal was still there, a hot ember in my chest. But for the first time, I felt like I had some control. They had taken my love and my loyalty for granted. They had assumed I would just keep paying, even after they kicked me out of their lives. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had no idea that the same meticulous, organized mind that managed their lives could also dismantle it with the same quiet efficiency. They had wanted the house to belong to Chloe. Now it did. Along with all of its burdens. 3 days. That's all it took for the carefully constructed world my family lived in to start showing cracks. For 3 days, I lived in a strange bubble of peace. I went to work, came home, and for the first time I started looking. NG online at condos for sale. Not just idly browse, but seriously considering it. I ran the numbers. Without the massive financial drain of my family, I could easily afford a down payment and mortgage on a nice 2-bedroom place of my own. The prospect was so thrilling it almost made me forget the ache in my heart. The call came on Friday afternoon, right as I was packing up my desk to leave for the weekend. My phone vibrated and Chloe's name flashed on the screen. My stomach did a nervous flip. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I knew I had to face this. This was the first test of my new resolve. I took a breath and answered. Hello, Chloe. Clara, her voice was a high-pitched shriek, laced with panic and tears. It was the complete opposite of my calm greeting. Clara, you have to do something. There are these papers taped to the front door. They look horrible. I leaned back in my office chair, picturing the scene. Brightly colored notices, probably plastered with words like past due and notice of intent to foreclose. I knew the bank wouldn't wait long after I told them I was no longer paying. What kind of papers, Chloe? I asked, my voice deliberately neutral. I don't know, foreclosure notices or something. It says the mortgage hasn't been paid. It's embarrassing, Clara. The neighbors can see them. Why is this happening? Her tone was one of utter bewilderment, as if the laws of finance were a mysterious force of nature that had randomly decided to strike her house. There was no acknowledgement of the events of the past week, no mention of the text message, just a demand for me to fix a problem she couldn't comprehend. The mortgage hasn't been paid, I repeated slowly, because I am no longer paying it. There was a stunned silence on her end, broken only by a choked sob. What? What do you mean you're not paying it? You always pay it. Yes, I did, I said. But as your new landlord, Dad, informed me on Tuesday, I am no longer welcome in that house. And since the house now belongs to you, I assumed you and your new landlords would be taking over all the associated responsibilities. That includes the mortgage. But I can't pay the mortgage, she wailed. You know I can't, Mom and Dad can't either. Why would you do this to us? The audacity of her question was breathtaking. Why would I do this? As if I were the instigator, as if their actions had no consequences. The old Clara would have felt a pang of guilt. The old Clara would have rushed to soothe her, to promise to fix it. The new Clara felt nothing but a cold, hard resolve. I didn't do anything, Chloe, I said calmly. I simply respected the decision your parents made. They ended our arrangement. I stopped paying. It's a very clear cause and effect. I'm actually surprised you didn't anticipate this. Anticipate this? How could I anticipate this? She shrieked. You're supposed to be the responsible one. You're supposed to take care of things. I am being responsible, I countered. I am taking care of myself and my own finances for the first time in 5 years. The house is your responsibility now. You wanted it, you got it. A new wave of hysterical sobs erupted from her. This isn't fair. You're trying to ruin my life, all because you're jealous of me. There it was again. The same tired accusation. It used to sting, but now it just sounded pathetic. Jealous? Of what? Her inability to support herself. Her dependence on the very person she scorned. I'm not jealous of you, Chloe, I said, my voice soft but firm. I'm sorry you're in this position, but it's a position you and Mom and Dad created. You'll have to talk to them about how to handle it. I could hear her taking ragged breaths, trying to find a new line of attack. The anger wasn't working, so she switched to pleading. Please, Clara, just for this month. Can you please just make the payment? We'll figure it out later, I promise. It was the oldest trick in her book, the promise of a later that would never come. It was the same promise I had been living on for years. No, Chloe, I said, I can't do that. Why are you being so cold? She whispered, her voice cracking. It feels like the house is being punished. It feels like it misses you or something. I almost laughed. The house didn't miss me. The bank missed my money. The tax office missed my payments. The life of ease they had built on my back missed its foundation. An idea, a perfect, final sentence, popped into my head. It was a little cruel, perhaps, but it was also the absolute truth. Well, I said, a strange sense of calm washing over me. I guess the house misses me too. I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call and dropped the phone onto my desk. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt powerful. I had held the line. I had spoken the truth. The foreclosure notices were just the beginning. They had no idea what was coming next. The car payment was due tomorrow, and that was before the repo truck arrived for the car. The repo truck arrived on a Monday morning. I know this because my father called me at 7:15 a.m., his voice not just panicked, but filled with a sputtering, righteous rage that I knew so well. It was the indignation of a man who believes he has been profoundly wronged, despite having initiated the conflict himself. Clara, they're taking the car. There's a tow truck in the driveway right now, hooking up the car. He yelled into the phone, his voice cracking with disbelief. You have to call them. Tell them to stop. There's been a mistake. I was in my kitchen, calmly making coffee, the morning sun streaming into my apartment. I took a slow sip before I answered. There's no mistake, Dad. What do you mean there's no mistake? Of course there is. We need that car. Your mother has a doctor's appointment this afternoon, he bellowed. This is your fault. My fault? I asked, my voice even. I'm curious, what part of this do you think is my fault? Did I co-sign a loan I couldn't afford? Did I stop making the payments on it? Oh, wait. That last one was me. But I seem to recall being formally uninvited from the family that uses that car. Did you think the car payments were a separate entity, magically paid by a car fairy? He sputtered on the other end of the line. Don't you be sarcastic with me, young lady. I am your father. And you are the one who sent me a text message effectively disowning me, I shot back, the dam of my composure finally cracking just a little. You can't have it both ways. You can't kick me out of your life but keep me on your payroll. That's not how the world works. I could hear my mother's frantic voice in the background. What is she saying, David? Tell her to fix it. My father's voice dropped to a low, threatening growl. You listen to me. You are going to call that finance company right now, and you are going to make that payment. You are going to fix what you broke. I didn't break anything, I said, my calm returning. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were a consultant explaining a failed project to a board of clueless executives. I just stopped propping up a system that was designed to fail. The loan is in your name, Dad. You are the primary borrower, I was the cosigner. When I informed the company I would no longer be paying, the financial responsibility fell to you. Did you make the payment that was due last Saturday? There was a dead silence. I already knew the answer. Of course he hadn't. He probably didn't even know the payment amount or the due date. Those were details for me, the family project manager, to handle. You knew this would happen, he finally whispered, the anger draining from his voice, replaced by a note of dawning horror. You knew they would take the car. Yes, I admitted. It's the standard consequence for non-payment. It's all in the contract you signed. Just like foreclosure is the standard consequence for not paying a mortgage. These aren't personal attacks, Dad. They are the predictable results of your choices. Our choices, my mother suddenly screeched, having grabbed the phone from him. Our choice was to protect our younger daughter from her cruel, bitter sister. We were protecting Chloe. And who was protecting me? I asked, the question soft but filled with the weight of years of neglect. Who was protecting me when I was working 60-hour weeks to make sure you had a roof over your head? Who was protecting my future when I put my own dreams on hold to pay for your life? You weren't protecting Chloe, Mom. You were enabling her. And you were using me to do it. She started to sob. They were the same practiced, helpless sobs Chloe had used. It was the family's default defense mechanism. What are we going to do, Clara? The foreclosure, the car, we have nothing. We have no money. I know, I said. It wasn't accusatory. It was just a statement of fact. A fact I had known and shielded them from for 5 long years. You've been living on my income, and now you're not. So you're just going to let us be homeless. You're going to let us be thrown out onto the street, she cried. The guilt, that old familiar friend, tried to sneak its way back into my heart. I could picture them, my aging parents, lost and frightened. But then I pictured the text message. You're no longer welcome here. I pictured Chloe's vacation photos. I pictured all the times my own needs were dismissed as unimportant. The bank hasn't thrown you out yet, Mom, I said, my voice gentle but firm. A foreclosure notice is the start of a long process. You have time to figure things out. Figure what out? My father's voice returned, laced with desperation. We need you to fix it, just reinstate the payments. We can talk about it, we can work it out. It was the offer I had been waiting for. The first sign of negotiation. The first crack in their impenetrable wall. Of pride. But the offer was based on the same old premise, that I would resume my role as the solution to all their problems. There's nothing to work out, I said. And there is nothing for me to fix. The decision was made, you made it. You told me the house belongs to Chloe. So the mortgage now belongs to Chloe. The car was for the family I was a part of. Since I am no longer part of that family, I am no longer paying for the car. It's very simple, really. I could hear them breathing on the other end of the line, the sound of 2 people finally, truly understanding the depth of the hole they had dug for themselves. They had pushed the button to launch the missile, never once considering that they were standing at ground zero. I have to go, I said. I have a meeting. I didn't have a meeting. I had a life to start living. Clara, wait, my father started, but I pressed the end call button. I stood in my kitchen, the coffee in my mug now cold. The silence in my apartment was profound. It wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. The silence of a storm that had finally passed, leaving behind a clear, clean sky. They had wanted clarity. Now they had it. A week passed, a week of silence. I imagined it was a week of frantic phone calls between my parents and sister, of poring over documents they didn't understand, of a dawning, terrifying realization of the financial world they had been insulated from. I spent that week solidifying my own future. I met with a realtor, got pre-approved for a mortgage of my own, and started seriously looking at condos. Each step I took toward my own independence felt like I was adding another lock to a door I had no intention of ever opening again. The final confrontation happened on a Saturday morning. I was just about to leave to view a property when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my heart sank. It was all three of them, my father, my mother, and Chloe, standing awkwardly on my doormat. They looked diminished. My father's usual proud posture was gone, replaced by a weary slump. My mother's face was pale and tear-streaked. Chloe was staring at the ground, her usual vibrant defiance completely extinguished. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and opened the door. "Clara," my father began, his voice hoarse. Can we come in, please?" I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. This was it, the final scene. They shuffled into my small living room, looking around as if they'd never seen it before. In a way, they hadn't. They had never cared enough to pay attention to my life, my space. They sat on my couch, a miserable trio huddled together. I remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter. I would not sit with them. I would not make this comfortable for them. We went to the bank," my mother said, her voice barely a whisper. "They explained everything. The loan, the arrears. They said we have to pay over $7,000 just to stop the foreclosure process. And the car is gone," Chloe added quietly, her voice devoid of its usual energy. "They said we'd have to pay the full remaining balance to get it back." "We don't have it, Clara," my father said, finally looking up at me. His eyes were filled with a desperation I had never seen before. "We have nothing." They let the words hang in the air, the final, pathetic confession. This was the moment they would ask, the moment they would beg me to turn back time, to rebuild the comfortable prison from which I had just escaped. "We were wrong," my father said, the words sounding like they were being physically pulled from his throat. "We were wrong to send that text. We were angry. We weren't thinking. We were just trying to stand up for Chloe," my mother added, as if that explained everything. "I understand," I said. My voice was calm, measured. There was no "I told you so." There was no anger. There was just a vast, quiet space where my obligations used to be. "But you did send it. And you were thinking. You thought I would just take the abuse and keep paying. You thought I would finance my own exile. Your mistake wasn't in the anger. Your mistake was in underestimating me." Chloe finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry, Clara," she mumbled. "I lied. You weren't being controlling. You were just right about the trip, about everything. I told them you were threatening to cut us off and they believed me. I'm so sorry." An apology. It was years too late and born of desperation, not true remorse, but it was an apology nonetheless. A few weeks ago, it might have meant something. Now, it was just noise. "Thank you for your apology, Chloe," I said. My father leaned forward, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Clara, please, we are begging you, is there any way you can help us? Just help us get current. We'll pay you back every penny. We swear, we'll do anything." This was the crossroads. I could step back into my old role. I could be the savior, the martyr. I could rescue them and in doing so chain myself right back to them. The thought was suffocating. "I can't help you," I said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of my entire future. My mother let out a small gasp. "You can't, or you won't." "Both," I answered honestly. "I can't because I am finally starting my own life. I just put an offer in on a condo this morning. My money from now on is for my future. And I won't because you have shown me who you are. I will not be your safety net anymore. I will not be the person you value only for her bank account." They stared at me in stunned silence. This was not the outcome they had prepared for. They had expected anger, maybe negotiation. They did not expect finality. "So what are we supposed to do?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "Just lose everything?" "No," I said. And in that moment, I offered them the only thing I had left to give. Not money, but a dose of the same pragmatism they had always relied on me for. "You don't have to lose everything. You have one very valuable asset, the house." Their heads snapped up. "You need to sell the house," I continued, speaking like the project manager I was. "The market is good. The property has appreciated significantly in the last 5 years, partly because of the improvements I paid for. You can sell it, pay off the mortgage completely, and still walk away with a significant amount of cash. Enough to buy a smaller, more affordable place outright. Enough to live on for years if you're careful. The solution was so obvious, so logical, but it was clear from their shocked faces that it had never even occurred to them. They didn't want a solution. They wanted a reversal. They wanted their old life back, the one that was comfortably subsidized by me. Sell the house, my mother stammered, but it's our home. It stopped being just a home when you turned it into a weapon, I said softly. Now it's a financial asset, and it's your only way out. I'll even give you the name of my realtor. She's very good. I walked over to my desk, wrote the name and number on a sticky note, and held it out to my father. He looked at the small piece of paper as if it were a death sentence. After a long moment, his hand trembled as he took it from me. That was it. I had given them my final piece of advice, my last deliverable in the project of our family. I walked to the door and opened it. I have an appointment to get to, I said. I think it's time for you to leave. They rose slowly, a defeated army, and filed out of my apartment. My mother wouldn't look at me. Chloe gave me one last, sorrowful glance. My father paused in the doorway. You've changed, Clara, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and resentment. Yes, I have, I replied. You taught me the value of a clear boundary, so thank you for the clarity. I closed the door on them and leaned against it, my legs finally feeling weak. The tears that I had held back for a week finally came, not tears of sadness but of relief. They were tears for the girl who had carried so much for so long, and for the woman who had finally learned to put it down. The price of my freedom was my family. And as I stood there in the quiet of my own home, ready to step into a future that was truly mine, I knew, without a doubt, that it was a price I was willing to pay. So, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have taken them back, reinstated the payments, and tried to mend the broken trust? Or would you have done the same, cutting the financial cord to save yourself? It's easy to judge from the outside, but when you're tangled in years of family history and emotional obligation, the right path is often the hardest one to take.